Well, good afternoon. I'm sat here in All Souls Church getting ready for Stations of the Cross, which is the first service we have during Holy Week after Palm Sunday. And I just wanted to tell you a little about who we are and what we do and what Holy Week is. We are a small Anglo Catholic congregation, fairly independent in Cathedral City. And I call it Anglo Catholic because that's firmly where we are now. And in fact, we always really have been. Since 2011, we've used Anglican liturgy. That's common worship, originally from the Church of England. I also use occasionally the 1928 Book of Common Prayer, the American prayer book. And occasionally when we have Bishop Floyd presiding, if I'm away, then they use the Roman Rite. That's the new Roman Rite. Anglo Catholicism is an extraordinary thing. It's certainly my origin. I started out as a Church of England priest, and during the course of my travels, ended up as an old Catholic bishop. But that's another story entirely. Let's stick to the Anglo Catholicism bit. So Anglo Catholicism was a branch of the Reformed Church, i.e. the Church of England, that came across this extraordinary revelation in the 19th century in what was called the Oxford movement, where it discovered in a huge burst of academic interest and spiritual revival that the Church of England was fundamentally still part of the ancient Western Church, that certainly in the Church of England, what had happened at the Reformation had not severed its roots. It still retained bishops, it retained the orders of priest and deacon, it retained the centrality of the Eucharist and all these different things. And there'd always been voices in the Church of England that stressed that Catholicity. So what happened in the Oxford movement was that it found its links to the ancient church, and it realized that the early church, as described by people like Justin Martyr, was fundamentally a mess, and that the liturgy of the early church was what we would call high liturgical, or Catholic, or Orthodox. And on top of that, there was a centrality of the saints and venerating the saints and relics and the Theotokos, the God-bearer, the Virgin Mary, as an especially revered human being whose yes to God had enabled Christ to come into the earth, into the world, and therefore our redemption, our salvation. So Anglo-Catholicism is a strange thing. A friend of mine once uncharitably described it as Roman Catholicism in drag. That's not really what it is. It is a re-engagement with the ancient church and with the richness of the liturgy and the theology of the Western Church, going back 2,000 years now. And we are like this because I believe it's true, right. It has retained the orthodox teachings of the church in a way that's applicable to all human beings. It allows me to give a very broad welcome, the broadest of welcomes, to people from lots of different backgrounds, without reference to papal doctrine. It also allows us to be true to the Nicene Creed and to the Apostles' Creed, those things which bind churches together from all over the world, in a way that is authentic, which is open to continued revelation, has a centrality of Scripture, and also understands the tradition of the church, going back as it does 2,000 years, and its antecedents in the Jewish faith. So that's where we are. And ever since I've been here, since 2011, although people have interpreted it differently, we've also had the services of benediction, occasionally used incense and all that sort of business. Well, those things are part of the expression of the Catholic faith in a way that we'd say with a small c, i.e. the universal church, the church that seeps into all places and whose remit runs in all places and with all people. Now, of course, that means that there's an enormous responsibility to make sure that the things which you're doing on a weekly basis aren't telling groups of people that you are unable to hear the gospel, that the gospel message is not for you, because that's fundamentally untrue. Now, that means you have to continually reassess the things you're doing as to how they are being exclusionary. It's not just all about innate characteristics. A lot of it's about the lives that people live. People have different viewpoints. They're from wildly different economic backgrounds. And if you're doing something which is just exclusionary, so for example, if I have a particular political viewpoint which I bang on constantly from the pulpit, well, what it means is I'm saying to everybody else that the politics of this world are more important to me than the gospel, and also that if you don't hold my view, you're probably not going to get very far here. And that's not acceptable. It's a luxury I can't afford. In addition to which, we are a 501c3 non-profit, which means that the IRS, the earthly authorities, say that we can't be partisan. So we're not. You will not hear me vouch my politics or anybody else's from this pulpit. You will hear me preach the gospel, which covers all things. It is in the gospel and it is in the scriptures and the tradition of the church that we will find the wisdom to navigate our way to the best of our ability through what goes on in the world.